Hey guys, it's Uncle Howie, and I'm back for the podcast this week. And just want to start off by saying, I'm really grateful for everyone who listens and watches these videos, and I hope that someday these videos find some young men that really uh, have have decided to accept some help and get better. And ultimately, even though this isn't a preaching series, this isn't for me to necessarily spread my faith. I do hope that many of you are impressed how valuable the faith that God gave to me many years ago, decades ago, how important that is to me. Um, and I think that when we talk about what it means to be successful, there's often a lot of confusion about what it means to be successful in this world versus to be successful in real life means that you're successful not only while you're alive but even after you die. We're all going to die. Every person, death is batting 1,000, and when we die, we're going to be shown a video, a recording of everything we've ever done. And not only will you be able to see the words you've said and the deeds you've done, but you'll be able to see, and so will everybody else. There will be no privacy on judgment. You'll be able to see your own motives, and we will be able to um, discern and understand what motivated every decision we ever made. And so sometimes we we do something so that we will look good to other people, and when that's the motive, it doesn't really carry a lot of significance. It doesn't really carry a lot of weight. Um, and so what I want to talk about today is how important it is to endure suffering, and how to endure suffering. So every person is going to die, and every person on the way to eternity is going to endure some suffering. And some people, when the suffering comes, when the persecution comes, when the misunderstandings arrive, when the pressure to perform for terrible motives comes our way, we just almost automatically cave into that pressure. We give in to our peers, we give in to the culture, we give in to politics, we give in to religious tradition, we give in to the expectations of our culture and our family, and with no other standard other than to perform for other people, to look good in the eyes of other people, we do and say things that we know in our hearts really aren't what we want to be. And so, in every video, we talk about setting goals and we talk about declaring our goals to someone else who can then hold us accountable. We talk about inviting people into our lives who've been down the road further than we have, who will then hold us accountable to do the things with good motives that will achieve our own goals. And so, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, you can start this process today by writing down a, the declaration of what your intentions are. In other words, set a handful of goals for your life, put it in writing, and share these goals with someone who you respect, who you honor, who in a sense, would like to emulate. Is there a man in your life and you think, man, I hope one day I'm more like this guy than I am like my current self? And if you have someone that you really admire, someone you look up to, and you say, listen, I don't need a lot of your time, but occasionally when we see each other, when we get together, when we have a cup of coffee, I want you to take these 5 goals and just remind me, hold me accountable to constantly be taking the steps toward these goals. And so, one of the things that stops us is it's almost like we are surprised when obstacles come, when persecution comes, when misunderstanding comes, when we lose a job, when we get kicked out of the house, when something terrible in our life happens. Sometimes we act like, you know how could this have happened to me? Like I'm not designed for suffering. But the truth is that every man on his way to victory suffers some defeat. If you think about the football analogy, even the best carriers of the ball, even the best receivers, the best quarterbacks, the best passers, they have all fumbled the ball. And brother, let me tell you, if you can't get from where you are to where you want to be without dropping the ball, it is going to happen. Sometimes it's going to be because you just slipped and you fell hard and the ground caused the fumble. And other times it's going to be because someone hits you from behind so hard that you just cough it up. It is going to happen. And so how do we prepare ourselves for the suffering that happens when we're blindsided? How do we get ready for that so that we get back up and we scrape the mud off of our face and we go back to the drawing board, we go back to the huddle, we go back to the classroom, we go back to the mission, and we make a decision to go back to our declaration, we go back to our goals, we get back to our intentions, and we focus on walking the path that is necessary to be successful, to be better, to be productive, to be useful to the people who are counting on us. And so, how do we get back on track when we've been knocked off of track? And part of that is a declaration that I am not going to let the fumble, the setback, the obstacle, the criticism, the pain, the sickness, the suffering, the jail sentence, the unemployment. I am not going to let these things that come into my life to sidetrack me have a victory in my life. I am determined. I declare that when I have a setback, whether it was caused by me and my own stupidity or whether it was caused by something or someone else, when I have a setback, I am going to go back to the classroom. I'm going to go back to the mission. I'm going to go back to my goals. I'm going to go back to the man who's holding me accountable. And I'm just going to start over. I'm going to start over every day and keep on the path of persistence. I'm going to keep walking the direction of my calling. I'm going to keep walking toward my goals. And I'm just not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. So, men, I know this sounds so like childish, maybe petty, maybe small time, small potatoes, but it's such an integral, crucial building block for success for you to just determine that I'm not going to quit on myself. I'm not going to quit on my family. I'm not going to quit on the people who depend on me today, but also I'm not going to quit on the people who will depend on me in the future. There are people you haven't even met, children who haven't been born, who are going to one day look at you and say, that is a man that I can depend on. That is a man I can follow. That is a man that I can count on. I remember when I was a kid, I was walking home from school one day, and I was a pretty mouthy kid. I told you guys in some other videos, I got into a lot of fights when I was a kid. And honestly, until I was 12 years old, I lost a lot of fights. It just seemed like I was always in the wrong place with the wrong group of kids, and I was always sort of the youngest or the smallest kid. And so when I got into a fight, it was always with somebody older and bigger. And until I was 12 years old and fought my here for the first time, I just got my butt kicked a lot. And so if there's one thing I know I'm good at, I am good at taking a beating. But I just couldn't keep my mouth shut. I wasn't scared of getting beat up. And so I would go back to the same people who beat me up before and I would run my mouth again. And so one day I was walking home and there was this big field between where the neighborhood where my school was and I would have to walk, through this big field and then I would have to go through a giant ditch. In Texas we call these giant ditches bayous. And I'd have to walk through the field, go down the bayou, up the bayou. If it was muddy, it was terrible. And then I would cross a hedge and then I would be in my neighborhood. And I could have gone way down and crossed a bridge, but being basically a lazy kid, I took the shortcut every day. And so I'm going through this field one day, and these kids come kind of jogging up behind me, and I hear them, and I turn around, and it's three older, bigger boys, and they were yelling, and they were saying curse words. They were mad at me for something I had either done or said. And listen, I don't want to tell you that I was innocent. I probably deserved the beating that I was about to get. I was very mouthy. Um, and it wasn't so much that I was confident that I could beat someone up. I had never won a fight. I think at this time I was about 10 years old. So at this point, every time I'd been in a fight, I had lost. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, where I'm about to take a beating from, one, two, or three of these boys, this kid rides up on a bicycle. And he lived in the same little community that I lived in. I lived in a community called Lamplighter. And this kid from Lamplighter, who I had, met, but I didn't really know him. And he was a couple years older than these older boys. So if I was 10 and they were 12, let's say this guy Timmy was 14. Timmy comes riding up on his bicycle and he does this cool thing where he like stops in the dirt, it's a little bit of mud, and he slides his bike and he lays it down and he jumps up and he stands between me and the other boys and he says, I don't know what's going on here, but it ain't happening. I don't like this. And he, basically he's like, you better leave this kid alone. And I just couldn't, I couldn't believe it. Like I couldn't remember somebody protecting me or defending me. Uh, I mean, I don't know. It was mind blowing to have this, kind of tougher, older kid uh, pull up his bicycle and just tell these kids they better stop or they're going to answer to him. And they looked up at Timmy. His name was Timmy Abear. Oh my gosh. Timmy Abear from Angleton, Texas. If you see this, please get in touch with me. I would so love to catch up. But Timmy Abear was my hero that day because he basically said, you take another step forward and you're not going to be fighting this chubby kid. You're not going to be fighting Howard. You're going to be fighting me. And he defended me. He stood up for me. I couldn't even tell you why. Maybe just because we were from the same neighborhood. Maybe because it was 3-on-1. I don't know. But he scared these three boys away and they took off and they jogged away off that field, went back to their neighborhood. And Timmy and I walked around to the bridge because he had a bicycle and it was muddy in the ditch. And we had this long walk. And while we were walking, I just remember asking him, why, why in the world would you take that risk for me? Why would you defend me? And I don't remember exactly what he said, but it had something to do with the fact that he didn't think it was fair. He didn't like the odds. He didn't like something about it, and he saw what was happening and he jumped in. And to say that at that point in my life, Timmy Abear was my hero is a huge understatement. And I remember he said something. I'm not exactly sure what it meant or why he said it, but he stuck his arm out like this and he said, "If this is my wing, you just get up under my wing, and this wing will keep you safe." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand it. But I'll tell you what, as a 9, 10-year-old boy in a rough part of Texas, I liked it. I liked the fact that I could tell people at that point, hey, Timmy Abear, if you mess with me, you're messing with him. And I remember thinking, man, I hope someday when I'm older that someone who's weaker than me, someone younger than me, somebody else who can't defend themselves, like this little fat kid that Timmy Abear rescued. I remember thinking, man, I hope I can do that for someone someday. I hope that I can be the kind of person who chases away the bad guys and can literally protect someone who can't protect themselves. That was a goal that I set for myself. I remember going to bed that night and thinking to myself, I want to be like Timmy Abear for someone someday. And it was a long time before that ever happened. Probably over the next 2 years, I took several more beatings. I wound up moving back into a horrible part of Houston from this small town I had been living with my aunt and uncle. And when I moved back into the city, I just, I kind of got in trouble, stayed in trouble, and I learned some pretty bad behaviors, some pretty bad coping mechanisms. I did not have a mentor. I did not have Timmy Abear to protect me when I went back to Houston to live with my biological family. And so for the next couple of years, I just kind of kept getting beat up until I was about 12. And then at 12, things started to change for me. And I finally got on that path where I learned how to not only defend myself well, but got to the point where I could protect other people. And, it's really funny because ultimately, you flash forward 7 years later, and one of my duties in the Army was to be a bodyguard for what they call a non combatant. So there are soldiers in the Army who are not allowed to carry a weapon, and so they have to have someone sort of stationed with them, someone that travels with them, someone that takes care of them, and someone whose job it is to protect them, even if it means to lay down their life. And so for several years in the Army, I got to be a bodyguard for a non combatant officer. And it was really amazing to know that my job was to protect this incredibly important man, and if need be, even lay down my life for that person. And so not only did I get to become the person I wanted to become, not only did I get to be like Timmy Abear for many people over the years, I actually got paid for it for a while, and it was literally my job to defend and protect and shield another man. And what was interesting is the men that I got to be a bodyguard for, it wasn't that they weren't tough. I mean, they were tough. They were soldiers. They had just taken a job in the Army where they had to agree not to fight and not to defend themselves. And so, anyway, you can look that up. You can Google non-combatant if you're interested in that. But I got to be a bodyguard and protect some people professionally. And then when I got out of the Army, I had a couple of other jobs where I did some security. And anyway, it was very exciting to see that the goal that I declared at the age of 10 became a truth in my life. But it didn't happen overnight. And on the road to achieving that declaration, on the road to achieving that goal, on the road to becoming a better version of Howard, I suffered quite a bit. And so, I don't want to be one of those guys. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not trying to pump you up and say, just embrace the suffering. And yet, on the other hand, it's predictable, right? And I know that on the path to being better, for some of you, on the path to real greatness, on the path to legendary heroic fame, for some of you. But for most of us, just on the path to being a better man, um, some some things are going to happen, and they're going to hurt. Some pain is coming your way. And so, the idea that you can avoid pain or avoid suffering or avoid becoming sick or ill or needing a surgery or losing a job, and all of these things have happened to me, and all of these things are going to happen to most men. You're going to suffer on your path to achieving the things that you've declared, the things that you've decided that you want to accomplish to be a better man. You're going to suffer. And so the question is, how do you prepare yourself for the suffering that comes? How do you determine to not let that obstacle, that suffering, take you off the path that you are called to and determined to fulfill in your life. And so, three things I want to share real quick, and then we'll just wrap it up for today. Number one is write down today on your paper, I know that I'm going to suffer. I know that I'm going to suffer. I embrace the suffering. I will endure the suffering. I know I'm going to suffer. I embrace it and I will endure it. I will get through the sentence. I will get through the punishment. I will get through the beating. I will get through the misunderstanding. I will get through the loss. I want to share with you guys the last several months of my life have it's been weird. My marriage is so healthy. I'm healthy. I've lost a bunch of weight recently. I've been kind of getting back in the gym, and a lot of good things are happening in my life. But my best friend for decades, a guy named Kevin. Kevin died last September, and it has been crushing. I mean, the level of depression that I've experienced since September has been worse than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And it has been a distracting amount of suffering. I can't tell you how many times I've been all by myself and just started weeping, because selfishly, Kevin was the guy that I, asked for accountability from. Kevin was the guy that I would call when, I had a great opportunity, when I wanted to start a new business. When I met my wife and we started dating, Kevin was the first person I called. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this woman. She's so beautiful." And she liked me for some reason. I was so excited. You probably, if you were listening to that conversation, you would have thought I was a little kid because of how excited I was. But just Kevin was my best friend, and he was the guy that I wanted to share things with. He was the guy whose feedback I wanted mostly in my life. And so when he died suddenly back in September, he had a heart attack, just never recovered. And when he passed away, it just left this enormous kind of hole, this gap in my life. And to be honest with you, it's probably the worst suffering I've ever experienced. It's you would think like if I was a kid with a terrible stepdad who beat me, if I grew up in a rough neighborhood and lost a bunch of fights and got physically tore up, and I've been broken and cut and stitches and um, I've been shot at. None of those things compared to the wear and tear that losing my best friend has had on me emotionally. It's just wrecked me. And so I'm sort of coming out of it now. It's been a while. And it's funny. I told my wife the other day, I was like, "Wow, I had a whole day where I didn't feel any deep sadness. Thank God." And so as I'm coming out of that, I look back and I realize that, um, that suffering was coming whether I could predict it or not. It was coming my way. And I have to decide every time I go through something difficult, am I going to endure this? Am I going to get through this? Am I going to overcome this obstacle? Am I going to deal with this pain in a way that makes me better at the end? Or am I going to use this as an excuse to go backwards? And so thankfully, I have two other men in my life that I can be accountable to. And so they're hanging on to me. I'm not as close with them. I haven't known them as long, but they're dependable, good men. And so I had three men I look up to enough to give my declarations to, and now I'm down to two. And honestly, it's enough. And so that's sort of uh, it's interesting because as a Christian, I hear other Christian men basically say, God's going to deliver you from that. Like there's nothing that can happen to you that you won't be rescued from. And yet, I don't. That's not part of my faith. Like some of my heroes. There's a guy from the Old Testament named Isaiah, and he did all the stuff God wanted him to do. He said all the hard things to people that God told him to say, and some of it was very difficult. And ultimately, the king took him and stretched him over, like a wooden horse, and sawed him in two. Now, the king didn't hold the saw, but the king ordered Isaiah to be sawed in two. Can you imagine the suffering of having a saw go through your belly and then through your guts and then through your back, and that's how you die? That does not sound good to me. That sounds terrible to me. And yet, because of his faith and because of his determination, because of his declaration, Isaiah endured a lot of suffering, a lot of separation, a lot of hardships, and ultimately he died for what he believed in. And that's the kind of man that I think we're called to be. Is not the one who always figures out how to get away with it, how to get around it, how to how to avoid problems and suffering, but the ones that take it head on and are determined to get through it. Those are the ones that wind up being the real leaders. And it boils back down to choosing to live a sacrificial life. So I know I'm rambling, Uncle Howie's podcast. I'm sure someday someone's going to find this and go like, who is this crazy old man who just rambles and tells stories? I don't know if this is good for you or not, but I do know that there's someone out there who probably needs to hear this. It's stand your ground, endure the hardship, endure the suffering, get through the problem. The sun will come up tomorrow and you can start over every day. One of my favorite promises from God is this. Oh, I love this so much. It's morning by morning my mercies are new. Morning by morning, my mercies are new. Every day you wake up and you get another chance to start over. So even if we screwed up yesterday, and we are all jackwagons, I mean, we are all jacked up people. The best man you ever met, my foster dad, who is just one of my biggest heroes, Timmy Abear. I hope you hear this someday, and I hope it encourages you. If you're friends with Timmy Abear, send him this podcast. All of us, me, Fred, Timmy, you, all men are jacked up and we are all struggling and we're all going to suffer. So, what makes one man better than another? It's this idea that you set these goals, you work a little bit every day towards the goals, you decide to be a better man, and you endure the hardships. And so, I hope this encourages you, and I hope you stick with me and keep coming back. Um, yeah, I got a lot more to say, and I hope this is helping someone make good decisions and be a better man.